It's easy to look around and notice everything wrong in your city. In this podcast by Every Neighborhood Partnership, join Grace and Andrew as they invite friends, activists, pastors, leaders, and city workers to discover what's good in the neighborhood. Join us for insightful conversations that will encourage you to see your city and its people in a new way.
Welcome to What's Good in the Neighborhood. My name is Andrew File, and on this episode, it's Grace and I as we sit down and just give you a little preview of a coming series, Advocate for Your Neighborhood. It'll be a series that has both personal, simple things you could do to be a good neighbor, but also some citywide, more systemic things that you can do to be a part of neighborhood transformation. So we're really excited about it. We wanted to kind of recap our own history as living in neighborhoods, how have we tried to be a good neighbor, and even think about how do the scriptures guide us in this vision of neighboring. So we look forward to it. It's a great series and a great start.
Hey everybody, welcome back to What is Good in the Neighborhood. I'm Grace.
I'm Andrew.
Well, we are so excited. We've been in a long series, literally called For the Long Run. And
we wanted to take it very seriously.
Yeah, it was very serious, very literal, long run series, long time in the series. But we are in a new one today. And we're talking about advocating for your neighbor, what it means to actually be a good neighbor. And so we're going to be hitting a lot of different topics that we'll get to here in a minute. But this is the first time, I think, since the beginning, since it's just been you and I, which is fun. And so I think as we are thinking through this episode and this idea of being a neighbor, I think it might be helpful for us to just share our own personal stories of what that's meant for us growing up. We're both not from Fresno, and so we've transplanted here. And so, Andrew, I think I'd love to hear a little bit from you, like maybe even the trajectory of like what it's meant, like how you grew up being a neighbor, maybe how it's transformed over the years.
Yep, totally. Yeah, because I think really, our thought in starting here is like our own personal context so much shapes our definition of what does it mean to be a neighbor, right?
Totally.
So from Bakersfield, holla.
Yeah. What up?
From Bakersfield, California. And really my parents were from different kind of rural communities, came to Bakersfield, and we're trying to really provide the best opportunity for their kids. And so we moved 3 times through my childhood, through high school. And each time was like to a new suburb. So they're really like, hey, best school, new opportunity. So I was a suburban kid. And especially my first neighborhood was that like idyllic 90s childhood where everybody like played in the streets. We had hockey games, basketball games, some cul-de-sacs. Like it was all these families intentionally moving to this new neighborhood for a new school. My high school location, the middle was very fast, but the high school one was the exact opposite. It was like a ghost town. Like you could literally see sometimes, what are those things? Those things that roll down the street.
Dust
yeah, because we were kind of on the edge of town. And so, but it was brand new suburbs and it was just, very spacious, setback houses. Yeah. Everybody had a boat or a trailer in their yard.
Yes.
So it was
like urban sprawl of Bakersfield.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Like total West Side, getting close to the 5,
Yes.
And now would be like the Liberty Frontier kind of area of town.
Which is like all built up now.
Yes, it is very established.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, like very suburban, very like, especially that last couple years in Bakersfield was very disconnected. And so I know as I came to Fresno and then got connected, I really wanted an urban experience. I did not have that. And I had been connected to some urban ministries who did intentional living in parts of Fresno. And so when my wife and I moved back to Fresno, we've been in the Tower District neighborhood since the whole time we've been here in Fresno. We've had 3 different homes as we've kept adding kids to our life.
Yeah.
But each home has really been in the Tower. I've loved the walkability, the arts and culture, the connectivity. There's a lot of people that have lived here for like raised families and, And then now I see a new generation of folks intentionally moving to this neighborhood, right? So I think that's a bit of my journey. I think the other piece I would add in there is my dad and my grandpa started an appliance repair business. My dad just retired from the business, sold the business. And in that selling and everything, Brian and I, my brother, were doing some reflection, and we realized one of the things, so my suburban growing up, I don't know if I had a great sense of place. But one of the things that did give me a great sense of place, or at least a vision, was my grandpa and then my dad have run this appliance repair business. So they fix washers and dryers. They go into people's homes for the last 60 years.
Wow.
And that's so it's one of those things, like an appliance repair person in some ways is like a very simple job, but then it's also a very intimate job. Like these are people that you like leave the key under the mat for. Like my dad is now was at the end of his time was repairing washers and dryers for kids that he saw raised in these homes, and so reflecting on, they were in Shafter, California, a small 10,000 persons community, Shafter, Wasco, that kind of area, Bakersfield. Reflecting on that, Brian and I have really done a lot of my dad and my grandpa really taught me about place, like being long-term invested in people and place. So that literally, it's every conversation they stop in at a house, they're like, "Oh, how's Johnny doing? How the Smith brothers doing?" I'm like talking like we're in a movie, but they really know, these families, these places, they mean something, and their connection has been so deeply rooted. So though I didn't probably have that childhood, I did see a model of people that know their neighbor, are connected to their neighbor, and really are part of the social fabric of a community. My grandpa is part of the social fabric of Shafter. Like, if you're from Shafter, Arlie and Arlie's Appliance. Like, it's just part of that community. And I think those are ways in which I knew that, because I would actually, in summer go with my dad and all that stuff. And so I saw this on display. And just be like, why did they let you in their home? Why did they leave a little pie for you? Just trying to connect the dots of what's going on here? And see my dad as a neighbor, my grandpa as a neighbor. So those are a couple experiences that have really shaped me. How about for yourself?
Oh man, a little bit more patchwork quilted, I think, but so many overlaps too of Bakersfield. And I think people who are from the Valley just get it in general. We're like, there's not a ton to do, but we love people. And people are the highlight, right, of who we are. It's like, we can't go to SeaWorld, but we can, go over to a friend's house and have the best time. So I think about that. My parents, and I think that also falls into my story of was born, and my parents, born and raised in San Diego, have deep social fabric connections to that community. And so it was really interesting. My parents are both born and raised very proud San Diegans, and it's a beautiful city, right? Has so much to offer.
And the Dodgers are proud to have knocked them out of the baseball playoffs.
Stinkers. And just a lot of pride around that. And grew up going to the zoo, we had season passes, that's what we did. And we're really well connected. We lived in the same neighborhood and community. My mom went to elementary school and middle school and high school, so knew everybody. I met my dad, similar area. And so, my whole family lived in the same geographical location. And so when we moved to Bakersfield when I was 12 or 11, it was
not in the traumatic years of teenager, about to be a teenager or anything.
Pre-trauma. It was a huge shift, and a huge shift for my parents. They were really trying. I mean, that's when San Diego was skyrocketing in prices, and they were like, we can't grow our family in the way we want to in this city. And so I think with a lot of grief, my parents moved, and it was really hard for them to love Bakersfield for all the silly, funny reasons that people make fun of. And then just community-wise, they were pretty lonely and, had left a whole city where our entire family was. And to go see them was a 4-hour drive. So what was really funny, and my mom will laugh if she listens to this, but we moved to the east side of Bakersfield into this old ranch-style house in this really old established neighborhood that had kind of been taken over by crime as the years had gone on. But my brothers and I have nothing but fond memories. We had this huge tree house in the back. We had the best neighbors. this family that loved Jesus. Like she came over, brought us homemade ice cream like the first
fun,
day.
yeah.
We had this huge, like, we'd never heard of deep pit barbecue before,
yeah.
and we
This big
had one in our
hole.
backyard. I have like a very clear memory of us all like looking in the pit, like,
Did
what?
somebody die down
Yes,
there?
like, what is this? The corn man down our street, like just really quintessential idyllic memories. And my mom has memories of like, no.
I'm worried about you playing out front.
Yes, like gunshots and the helicopters and don't go past our street, you know? And so it's just funny, you know, as kids, like the ideas that we come up
You
with.
must have felt safe from the way your parents raised you, though.
Totally,
So they didn't
100%.
share all that.
Yes, exactly. But I think what it taught, I think my parents instilled with me like a love for a city and also a deep critic of where you live. Like, have a clear understanding. My dad has always been involved in politics my whole life. Lots of like roundtable dinner conversations about why the mayor is doing this and who's running for school board, and like, let's have a discussion about it.
He's actually a city planner, right?
Yes.
So he really thinks deeply about cities.
Yes, he does. And so that was really funny, him being like a lifelong San Diegan. Now here we are in Kern County, and he's having like a very critical, like,
These
what?
probably these ideas that are just commonplace in San Diego.
Yes.
Going to Bakersfield, it's like,
Yes.
they're like, no, more suburbs.
Yes, exactly. And so also like a funny wrinkle in that was because of the neighborhood that we lived in and the type of school that was in our neighborhood, my parents sent me to a private Christian school that was like a 45-minute bus ride away. And so as much as we had amazing neighbors, we loved our street. My parents were like, no, we're going to bus. So just kind of a patchwork quilt of an experience. And then as Matt and I got married, was kind of similar. I totally resonate with like, we went at urban setting. So we moved to downtown Bakersfield, had the coolest little house across from Bakersfield High School. And that's just kind of how we've always, you know, seen ourselves when we moved to Fresno. We moved to the Tower, similar. The funny, I think, unique part of our story is for 4.5 years of our marriage, we lived up in the mountains in a really rural community, one school, one church, 300 people.
Wow.
And it taught, as much as it was like not diverse at all, like racially, socioeconomically, it taught me so much about like relying on other people. We had one lawnmower that like 7 houses shared. It'd be like literally run into your friend on the road and be like, I got spaghetti. You have ground beef? Okay,
Let's
dinner
do dinner.
tonight.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking 5 days out of the week like that. My baby.
I remember, you telling me a story too of your neighbor really coming over when you're having a hard time as a mom.
Yes.
And it's just like people saw your stuff.
Yes.
Whether you wanted them to or not. Like
Yep.
you're in such a small community that people saw it and also stepped in beautiful ways.
Yes, you'd be like walking to go get an Amazon package, crying.
Yeah.
Or I'd see a friend crying and be like, what's wrong? Like, it's just everyone saw your stuff. And so it taught me a lot about community. And so then moving back into an urban environment where people are so disconnected, it was jolting. It was like, oh, okay. Like, I don't just get to like show up at my friend's door. I should probably call. Like, and as funny as that is, it was really difficult to be like, oh, people don't live as hyper communal as I have for the last 4.5 years. What can I bring as a gift now to my community and my neighborhood?
Yeah.
And also like, what is mine to relearn? So, yeah.
That's good. As you kind of think about what that definition now, as you think about what a neighborhood is, like how to be a good neighbor, like what are you imagining now? What does the word neighbor mean? Is that like your literal proximate, like, 9 houses around you kind of thing? Or is that city, like global neighbor?
Yes.
Like how do you think about that? Even, faith orientation, like what is, like how does Jesus affected that definition for you? I don't know.
Yes. I hope you answer too, because I'm really curious about your answer. I think it's changed a lot over the years. I think as my faith has changed. I think now it's my physical neighbor, how like within my my actual localized place, those people that live on our block, and the people that we've like looked at each other and been like, yeah, we're gonna ride. Like we've locked arms. You're my community. Whatever you need, And so I think it's been a bit of both, but it is localized. For like, that's what the word means to me now. I think that there's a lot to be said around the idea of like everyone that you encounter as a Jesus follower is your neighbor. And you should treat them as such, you know? So
like
I'm
Good Samaritan kind of vibe.
Yes, totally. And like, we know that we encounter God when we encounter the poor. And so I think that has really resonated with me of like, when I go outside of my comfort zone to be a neighbor to somebody who needs a neighbor. Like, yeah, the Lord meets us there. So I think yes, but I think as I've thought about walking in the way of Jesus more recently, in probably the last 3-4 years, it's been who's around me, who can I affect, who like doesn't know the Lord, and like maybe I'm not having like direct evangelism conversations with them, but just the fact that they're encountering my family and just engaging, and we just get to be together and spend time, like, yeah, hopefully they'll, be encouraged. What about you?
You know, I think there's always like, especially I've lived in Tower here, and then I think as I've been really shaped by this Christian community development idea, right? That's being an intentional neighbor and intentionally going into spaces that are not necessarily designed for you. So we lived in South Tower kind of area by Susan B. Anthony Elementary. You know, we were one of 2 white families on that street. You know, mariachi music's just blaring next to my house all day, you know. And it was a very active thoroughfare for going to Blackstone. So a lot of unique people walking by. Some that I was like, oh, I hope you don't. I don't know if I feel safe right now. You know, with tattoos all over your face, right?
Yeah.
So I think I've lived in intentional spaces. I think what I've learned along the way, and even just trying to continue to foster, is that like being a neighbor is just about intentionality. Everybody wants community. Everybody wants this ideal neighborhood. So even on our street, like, you know, we had people that lived there 30 years and they're like, oh man, in the early 90s, mid 90s, we used to do block parties. Everybody would come out and it's like, great. Why don't you do that now? I don't know. Like, I don't feel safe. I don't know anybody. Great. So we hosted a block party every summer for 5 years. Still about a third of people came. Like, so we had very low attendance. But at least we were trying to create that world. But I think there's also like this really cultural perception of safety and what community is that I think we're fighting upstream to create like intentional neighboring around us. I live in a neighborhood now that like so lucky to have within, I think, 6 houses of me, I have like, I don't know, 14 kids that are similar to my kids' age. And even just a larger connected community around us wants to be intentional. So we just 2 weeks ago had a neighborhood block party that other people put on. We all went, bring food, potluck kind of thing. So I'm like lucky to live in a neighborhood where I get to participate in that and help with that, but it already kind of exists. But I think it's also like fought for. So I think it doesn't just happen. You have to plan it. We do, as our neighborhood, we'll do the, like you said, hey, Sunday night, like we just did it probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where somebody just said, hey, we're going to have a picnic, bring your own dinner, but we'll hang out on the porch and hang out on the front lawn. So 4 families came over and did that. But, you know, whether it's us doing it or other people doing it, it's intentionality to do that thing. We're coming up here. This episode will probably release after Halloween or maybe around it. But, you know, something we've done since our old neighborhood is like we do s'mores during Halloween. You've come to our
Halloweenies.
Yeah, so you've come to our Halloween party before.
Yes.
And, you know, it's an attempt for us to get people to slow down along the way and have a conversation. And then, like, just to see the joy also. Like, we're known now as the house that does the s'mores. People are like, oh, yeah, the s'mores. I love that. And even people that are new are just like, they connect right away to this moment in a campfire, you know, and now we have a little bit of a conversation. How are you doing? How was tonight? Where are you from? Halloween, a lot of our people don't live around us. They come in for the candy. We have some people that are generous. That will be me this year,
actually. We moved out of the neighborhood, and literally Matt and I were talking about Halloween. I said, well, we're going down there. I miss it.
So anyways, I think for us, like the bigger thing that now I think about my proximate neighbor. And then in Fresno, I get the pleasure to travel into, I'm probably in like 30 different neighborhoods at any given month,
Yeah.
just because of like these random meetings, conversations I'm a part of. So to stop in at a school and see and connect with people, and now to build cross city relationships, I know I don't live in their neighborhood, but I know some of the blessings of that neighborhood. The like going into Southwest, like people are like, oh, it's dangerous, it's unsafe, or it's bad. It's like you got families that have lived 3 generations here. There is crime issues and there's things going on, but like these are people deeply committed to each other and to this place and for a new future together. And so I get to hear those conversations of neighbors caring about one another. And that's expanded, I think, my definition of what does it mean to be a neighbor in the city. And I think the larger sense that even I think the Sermon on the Mount, but the Good Samaritan gets to is that our city's flourishing is tied up in all of our neighbors feeling connected and flourishing.
Yes.
So we can't say Fresno's working, Fresno's doing great when like we have these neighborhoods that feel real pain and isolation and they feel cut off from all the success other neighbors are feeling.
Well, I think that's what I was going to say is like, I think the clincher there is like the feeling of isolation, like that you're not connected, that you are alone. And when we talk about like, get out and do these things with your neighbor, like as you're able, because there's so many people in our neighborhoods that are not able or feel alone or don't have the resources to do it. And so who can you, if you are able, who can you show up for and advocate for, who is maybe lives alone, is disabled, has a special need, doesn't have the money or the resources to come outside and give more because they're just trying to get by, having eyes for the people in your neighborhood that are isolated and alone. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's been the biggest, one of the biggest ahas. Poverty is not financial.
Yes.
Like you ask people in poverty is an emotional and a social isolation. They feel disconnected from those around them, feeling like no one is here to support me.
Yes.
And that's like the hopelessness that surrounds poverty. And we know this, like all the stats say, like our areas of poverty, those kids don't have chances to graduate out of that poverty. We don't have a meritocracy where it's like, if you just work hard, it's like, no, sometimes if you're born into this neighborhood, that's going to follow you because you're disconnected from people who have jobs, disconnected from people that could employ you, disconnected from other examples, right? So I think that's, seeing some of the challenges. It's like, oh, being a neighbor means also sometimes you have to go to different places and enter into the problems of this community. You can't do that in every neighborhood, but you can do it in one one relationship that leads as a gateway to a neighborhood, right?
Yes. Can you cast for us a biblical vision? I know you and I have chatted about Nehemiah and like what a developer he was. How is he an example for us today as we try to be good neighbors?
Yeah, I just was doing a teaching series for the Pink House. It's an intentional living program, and I had them dive into Nehemiah because I think this example, he's, if you don't know the context, so he's grows up in a foreign land. His community, he's from Israel. His community's been conquered, torn apart. He's been captive and taken to the Persian Empire. He happens to grow up in wealth and privilege in Persia. And so he's actually connected to the king, connected to leadership, but finds out, hey, your homeland, it lies in desolation. Like it's destroyed. There are people that live there, but they're afraid, they're vulnerable, they have no walls, no protection. It is not this like beautiful, great story that you think maybe that land is. And so he realizes and just has this conviction from God where he owns a problem that really he didn't cause this problem, but he's like, this is my people and I have a responsibility. Yeah. I have a duty, and really goes before the Lord in prayer and fasting. And it's just like, God, help me to do something here. And his ask, he swings big, goes to the king who doesn't from this area, doesn't care. But he's like, give me money, people, time to go to my homeland and restore this land. And so he goes back, and again, really is struck by the sadness, the state of affairs in Israel. But what I love is you just watch Nehemiah as this like master community developer. And even as we think about what we try and do in our city, it really starts with listening and understanding kind of what's the reality on the ground from those experiencing it. So he walks around the city at night when no one knows.
Very detailed book.
Yes, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He's taking notes, he's
Yes.
seeing, but then he starts having conversations. He does these one-on-ones, and he's really learning from people and just going like, what would you do? Would you join me in fixing this? And he's kind of just gets everybody to own their piece of the pie. And through that process, he says, let's go, let's do it. And in a record time, they rebuild the city walls. He has a ton of opposition. A lot of people that standing against his way saying like, who are you? You're not from here. This is not yours to do, right? So he faces a lot of challenge, but he just knows like, this is mine to do. He later then works with a pastor, a priest to, support the spiritual development of the people. So I think Nehemiah is just this amazing example as I think about being a neighbor and going to places even that like, I'm not from Fresno, and I'm not from some of these neighborhoods. And we don't have the answer. Like I don't have the answer how to solve some of these problems in Southeast, downtown, Southwest Fresno that seemingly are intractable, yet there are people that care, that are already there, that also have solutions, and we can join them all together to do something, right? And knowing that God is part of his vision is this kingdom restored, this world that works for everybody, where there's peace between people, with people, and around people. And we get to be a part of that. And so I think Nehemiah is just a great case study of what does it look like to advocate for your neighbors. And again, Nehemiah could have just stayed in Persia and been like, dude, I'm hooked up. Like I got great food. I got great education. I have everything I need. I am good. I am not from there. I didn't grow up there. I don't even know the culture, the language, the everything. But that's my people, or this is the call God has for me. So,
Yeah. It reminds me of like when God has a work for you to do, like, and you obey, like he will pave the way. And I think that's the sweetest part is like Nehemiah you're right, such a great case study. And you have to be willing to look around and care.
Yes.
To have a care.
You're heartbroken, as his was. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And to hear from other people what's going on. It's so easy today to be insular.
Oh, yeah.
And to stay on our sides of town. And yeah, my husband and I recently moved away from the town, which was so sad. But as we've moved, it's like I could literally stay in this little 2-mile radius and take care of all my stuff. Thankfully, my work and my daughter's school takes us away from our neighborhood, but it is like it could be so easy. And so I think I just want to say we hear you of like, I don't know where to start, or I don't really see it. Can you help me understand? And I think both you and I would both say like even just step outside your front door, right? Like that would be a great first step to see like what's going on. Just as like even a practical aside, and I know you'll chat about this too, just like the idea of being present. But Matt and I will just like sit outside on our front grass. We'll put out a blanket, let the girls play, and now we're not just sitting there because we want to have a good time and have a good drink. We're sitting out there because we want to be present and available. Now it's like if someone walks by, we're going to engage in a conversation, not because it's like so great of us, but because if I'm intentionally here on purpose, then there's work for me to do in this space. And maybe if I just got curious with somebody, I'd learn something outside of myself.
Well, and I don't remember where I got this definition. I feel like Dave Obald or something, but somebody has said leadership is the act of like taking a risk on behalf of others. And so like I think that's the thing is like we wait for someone else to do it, right? And so even like to intentional, Denise and I do the same. So we redesigned our yards recently, and we left the grass in the front, and then the back is like a garden and sitting area. for hanging out. But like we play in the front. We have 4 boys. It is a sport court all the time.
Yes.
And we sit on the porch in the morning drinking a coffee. You know, the other day I was getting my car washed, and at red carpet, the guy comes up and he's like, "You live in Tower, huh?"
Wow.
And he's like, because he runs by, I was like, "You run all the time by my neighborhood." He's like, "Exactly." He's like, so we wave at each other, you know, like every week or two, maybe, you know, but it's like, so I know Michael, you know, he works at Red Carpet Car Wash. But being present on the front porch, he would wave at us, we'd wave at him, and now I have a friend, you know? And it's like, that's creating the world we both want to live in. And he took the risk even to say, "You're that guy in Tower I run by with your wife," you know?
Yes. But it's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so sweet. What else? Like, what else are some other ways that, like, you've seen, like, how you can be present? Or even, I think, as we think about, like, the needs of our neighborhood or the places, like, the gaps in our neighborhood, how you can first off start to care. And then secondly, like, how to keep, like, engaged and know what's happening.
Well, and some of the things we're going to do in this series that I think will be good is we'll have some, you know, just individuals sharing their own, how are they being hospitable, right? What are they doing to welcome people? And just those stories of hospitality. And trying to be a part of, you know, a church that's doing that, part of their own just living in a neighborhood. We'll share some of those just individual stories. But I think the invitation too will be, how do you join what the city is also doing in your community? So we'll tell some Fresno stories, right? So, but if you don't live in Fresno, there's plenty of other ways your city is doing planning. Your city is having conversations about its future. That you can join, you know, like recently I live in the Tower, and the Tower District is going through their, it's called like the Tower District specific plan. And that is the city's plan to say, how should this neighborhood be built for the next 20, 30 years? That's a big, like it's kind of a wonky, you know, it can be not boring, but it's technical.
Yep.
But like to be a part of that process now means that the next 20 or 30 years, there's a clear vision for what type of place I want to be a part of and how I can shape that now. I don't need to wait 20 years to complain about what the city did wrong or what we wish would have happened. But I get to dream alongside my neighbors and then hold them accountable, hold myself accountable, hold the city accountable to how do we create this here in our neighborhood, right? So we'll talk about some like really specific ways also that you could join a class or what your city's doing. And ways that you can actually just begin to foster this like systemic change of neighboring. You know?
Yes. It's so much easier to complain, though.
Yes. it is
really
way easier.
is.
Totally. Oh, totally. Yes.
It's so much
Get on Facebook.
Yes.
Take a pic. I saw a couple of Facebook posts this week where it's like, why isn't anything happening here?
Yes.
You know, and somebody's like, well, here's the long story. It's like, you can join your district planning commission and help be a part of making those decisions, you know?
Yes. In our instant culture, it's so easy to just be like, ugh, that's going to take forever. And that is the holdup, right? Is people go, they see something they want changed. It's easier to complain, whether that be to a neighbor, a friend, or on Facebook. And just the recognition of like, this is going to take a long time. You're talking 20 or 30 years.
Yes.
That's a long time. And yet it will affect your lifetime and will affect your kids' lifetime. You know, if they choose to continue to be in the space. And even if they don't, it's the neighborhood that they grew up in. Like, that we care. It's like the Nehemiah thing. Like, yes, he wasn't in the space anymore, but those were his people. And so it's just that idea of like, are you willing to take the risk to invest for the long term? I love that verse in the Bible of like, that we get to sit in the shade of trees that we planted. And like, that's long-term investment. We do it for ourselves individually as we build our own empires. We invest money. We love to watch stocks, whatever, the finance bros. But we can do that for our city. Yeah. And you can do that for your neighborhood. You can do it for the physical places that you inhabit.
Yeah.
So.
And most of the time, all this stuff is unrewarded, right? That's you have to have a big why here.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have a big like, I am a part of something larger that sometimes I don't get to see the end of this story. But like I'm a part of something hopefully beautiful that transpires. Because again, like you said, it takes a while. But like I was at a friend's house and they live by gazebo gardens and they wanted to try and get to know their neighbors. They invited, 40, 50 people and 7 showed up, and hey, like all I could say to them was, way to go. Like you took a risk on behalf of others. You put yourself out there. And then they even got some really sweet, like people wanted to be a part that couldn't. Like this, one of their residents, one of their neighbors, like is traveling overseas. She actually sent a note to their house to say, I want to be there next time. So like they're now also creating a culture that hopefully their neighborhood, this could be a thing that like people are like, I feel like this is a place I belong.
Totally.
That's the dream.
Yes. My husband's parents have hosted a Christmas party every year for like the last 20 years just for the neighborhood. And they're in their 70s now and they walk and they just put an invitation on everyone's door.
So sweet.
And Matt says like he remembers when they first started and literally like 2 people showed up. And now there's like, I think they told us last year, like 35 people come and people like neighbors will bring their friends, because it's a thing now.
Yeah.
But it takes long term. It's long term. Yep.
Well, I hope in this series you're encouraged. I think I would love to hear stories, even as you comment or email us. But like, how are you trying to do that? I hope you're challenged. I hope you're encouraged. It'll be a great series, advocating for your neighbor. And so we're looking forward to it.
Yes, I think it's going to be filled with lots of big detailed strategies like Nehemiah, and then really simple things like leave a note.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's the beauty of the series. And hopefully people are encouraged by that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a city planner, but you also can just do the next thing to open a door for somebody who's maybe feeling really lonely. So awesome. I'm excited.
Well, we look forward to having you and see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to find out more about EMP, you can visit us at everyneighborhood.org or follow us at EMP Fresno. Every Neighborhood Partnership and this podcast exists to activate, equip, mobilize, and transform here in Fresno and beyond. If you liked what you've heard, please share and review what's good in the neighborhood wherever you listen. We'll see you next time.